Welcome to Transfiguration in idyllic Oakdale. It is quite idyllic today. It's kind of nice out. It's like 70. It's almost too hot. We have tonight a group of men from our men's group, the young men's group, the JV group, as the old guys would say. So I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, and we're going to talk tonight about fraternity, fatherhood, and whatever else comes out of our mouth. So we'll just introduce ourselves, who they are, their family, how long they've been here at Transfiguration, and whatever else they want to say. So go ahead, gentlemen.
Adam's looking at me like I should introduce myself first. Jeffrey Morgan, and the how long we've been at Transfiguration is a interesting question. I think we've been coming to Transfiguration since 2013. So after we were married in June of 2013, we moved into an apartment just up the Century Avenue, so we came to Transfiguration. My wife and I now live in Matamidi and still come because of the great community. So we have 3 little ones with one on the way in October. So yeah, it is a great community to definitely be a father in and be a brother to these guys.
I didn't ask the question earlier, but I think it's probably interesting to hear what brought you here and then what keeps you here. Adam mentioned last time it was the Father Bear connection from the last chance mass at St. Thomas, but maybe it was just a location. So if you want to say what brought you here and what keeps you here, that'd be interesting as well.
Yeah, so what brought us here was the location, I think. And I think it was there's a lot of great parishes around the Oakdale area. But yeah, I think what kept us here is I think it was around the time that the start of the young adults group. I think it was the same year, like shortly thereafter. And just the community that was built there was awesome. And that's what's kept us around, just being able to raise kids with other like-minded, quote-unquote, young adults, or young at heart adults.
Getting older every day.
Matt Mulligan here. Been coming to Transfiguration since 2014. We currently live in Woodbury with my wife, and we have 3 kids. A daughter who's turning 6, a son who's turning 4, and another son who just turned 2. Like I said, coming to Transfiguration since 2014. We had moved to Oakdale at the time. We ended up here because we had been in Roseville and going to St. John the Baptist up in New Brighton for a while, and as we were leaving, one of the guys there in the young adult group there that had just started said, "Hey, you really got to go to Transfiguration." And so even though we were like, okay, well, so what's the big deal? And we were closer to St. Peter over in Oakdale there where we lived, but ended up here on the recommendation. You know, Father Bear at the time, he was spitting some brimstone. We enjoyed that. But shortly after that, the young adult group, like Justin and Jeff mentioned, started, met some great other individuals here that I'm just currently sitting around the table with. Our wives were pregnant, or a lot of there was a big group of wives pregnant at the same time too. That I think there was at least 4 or 5 little girls who were born within like 5 months, and I think the ladies really bonded over that. I remember meeting Adam the first time. It was one of these young adult dinners that we had, and he was wearing, or Maureen, his wife, was wearing a Packer sweatshirt, and it was like, oh, instant connection right there. What are you doing on this side of the river? And best friends.
I'm surrounded by Packer fans right now. Thank God the season's not happening right now. We'd be talking about something else.
Or maybe at all. Hey, Adam Truler here, back again. Kind of talked last time, but we've been parishioners here since 2012. Followed Father Bear here from his time at St. John Vianney Seminary. My wife Maureen and I have 4 kids. Eleanor she'll be 6 in July. Clara just turned 4. Vincent is 2.5, shares a birthday with Justin's daughter, and Julia is about 9 months. So,
well, welcome, guys. It's awesome to have you here.
Thank you.
Some of these guys are one of the guys that kind of had the reason to do this podcast, to start this podcast. And we hope it's something that you would like to listen to and to get to know more of our parishioners. We'd love to continue to do these podcasts. Please give us feedback, whether you like it or you don't, or you want some guy back or you don't want him back. You can just email me. I don't have to tell them. It'll be fine. They just won't get the text message next time. They'll be fine. No, but we were kind of talking, 2 days ago, right? We sat around Adam's garage and had some drinks and some cigars.
Under the correct social distancing guidelines, of
Yeah,
course.
we all are right now, by the way, too. These mics have an appropriate distance between each other, so don't worry. But we were kind of talking about, we enjoy the conversation to just get together, and sometimes our wives ask us, hey, what'd you guys talk about? And typical guys, we're like, I don't know, Adam got a new smoker. I don't know. I think he's doing good. But it's just nice to have brothers to hang out with. Yeah.
Looked like
He didn't
was
look
in good
sickly.
health. Yeah.
He's got a new driver. I don't know. But we want to just talk about fraternity and fatherhood and what does it mean to us and where do we learn to be a father. And maybe you guys want to spit about the last dance or the leadership or the whatever. So I'm just kind of throwing it out there. This is a little bit of a round table tonight. So any of you guys have thoughts on what brotherhood or fraternity means to you? And all of you mentioned that that's part of the reason you're still here. So I think there's something going on. There's something good within it that's keeping us all together. And it's not just because y'all are awesome guys. You're great guys. However, there's something good within just brothers being together. And I think one of the things for me getting married 8 years ago now, someone told us a long time ago, even before I got married, that your wife will not be able to fulfill all of your desires. She won't be able to fulfill all of your needs. You need brothers to run with. You need brothers to have your back, and you need brothers to just hang out with, and sometimes you need brothers to just listen to you complain. You also need brothers to help you give you advice on which smoker to buy. So maybe just your own experience with the brotherhood in general and your experience with the brotherhood here at Transfiguration. What has been beneficial to you?
I've got a real hot take on this that I'll save so someone else can go first.
Here's looking at you, Adam.
Hot take. We need some. We need some pew 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 pew. Hot take.
We need a soundboard for like a radio DJ that we can play some of that. No, and I think, and this is really something that I think I've just being around you guys and being around a lot of the men within the archdiocese and a lot of the great events that are put on, and it means a lot of different things, quote unquote brotherhood, just from a standpoint of, kind of to your point, Justin, of, yeah, there's things that, we can talk about over a bourbon and a cigar that you could talk with your wife about, but you just need men to kind of keep you in line. And
sometimes they just don't get it, right?
Right.
They just
That
don't
too.
get it, and that's fine. They just don't, right? Like, their minds don't work the same way, or they're not thinking on the same wavelength, and
They don't get what?
they don't understand. I think a lot of times, either the psychological things that we work through in life, or the things that drive us all the time. My wife doesn't understand why I want to work and go to school and work on 15 different side hustles at the same time. She doesn't get that, and it frustrates the hell out of her. But I have other brothers here that do kind of understand that, and so it makes it a lot easier for me to find an outlet for that rather than just having my whole life be within the four walls of my house.
Yeah, and remember that brotherhood doesn't just accidentally happen either. We don't. We have to be intentional about it. So we have to go out of our way. And this is not just an extrovert introvert thing. This is a human thing. This isn't we're all extroverts around this table. We're not, But we all have this desire to have brothers around us, to be a part of a wolf pack. I don't remember what movie that's from. Jeff's
The Hangover.
The Hangover. Yeah.
And there was one in the wolf.
I've never
pack.
seen that movie. I've never seen it.
I was just
I've
thinking
only
of the wolf shirts that have like the wolf howling at the moon
with the tie dye.
With like the dark tie dye that you could get at. I think they only sell them at Goodwill and other thrift stores. I'm not sure if you can buy those new. But no, I think that's 100% right. You need
the intentionality is.
Yeah.
That's so true, because I think that the group that we have here at the parish, and that over the last 6 years or so, it's kind of it's ebbed and flowed. The last few months has kind of been an ebb with everything going on, but one of the key tenets of it was meeting every Saturday or every other Saturday morning at 6:30, 6:45. Chris Marsh, it is now 6:30. We are now meet at 6:30. But every other Saturday, we'd get our butts out of bed. We'd drive over to church. Someone would bring breakfast. A couple people would bring breakfast. We'd have, maybe we were doing a reading, a part of a book or the catechism at the time. But we had a steady group, and we still do, even of 6 to 8. And at some points, it got up to like 12, 15. And it was just this core group of guys that they were going out of their way. They were taking time away from their sleep, from their wives, from their kids if they had them. Whatever state in life they could have been doing anything else on a Saturday morning at 6:30. And that intentionality was really critical for me, and I've noticed that now especially, that it takes dedication and frankly a specific time set in order to make it successful.
Well, I think and some accountability too with your other brothers, because I'm sure there's been times where, whether it's you don't want to get up, and Justin texts me at 6:25, "Hey, coming this morning?" Yeah,
I had my phone off.
I'm sleeping at the moment. I'll be there at 6:45. But no, I think a lot of it is accountability that, yes, you could get from your spouse or from someone else, but it's good to have people that hold you accountable and share life with, whether it's all the way from your prayer life to, hey, I'm struggling with how do I parent a disastrous 2-year-old, which I think we all could still bring that to the table. But no, I think accountability was a huge part for me, and I think I'm one of the ones during this pandemic that have not been to the virtual 6:30 meetings, as Justin shakes his head at me, but I think the in-person, getting to see people, and me being an extrovert, I like to see people, and when the pandemic is over, give people hugs and shake people's hands. And
you like going to Quick Trip that early too.
Quick Trip, getting a big old Karuba coffee, and it wouldn't be advised during this time, but
yeah, and let's be clear, like, men's group at 6:30 on a Saturday is not for every guy. However, as Matt said, you might think it's not for you just because you're being like maybe a little bit lazy. However, it might not be for you just because that's not what's going to fulfill what you need right now. But I think maybe all of you can say something that is universal for all men. For the guy that's listening right now, or the lady that's listening right now and is thinking, like, actually, I kind of like this quarantine thing. I like not having to hang out with anyone and doing my own thing. We're just not, we're not created for that. We're created for community. Whether we deny it or not, we're created for community. So what would you say to the guy or the gal who's listening now and is saying, like, that's great for you guys, but y'all probably just like each other, and y'all like to wake up at 6:30 in the morning on a Saturday and talk about your feelings, and I don't like to talk about my feelings, and I don't want to read the catechism, and I don't want to hang out. For one, the Saturday morning thing isn't the only thing. There's the monthly gatherings, there's the smoker poker, there's there's just hanging out, you know.
Wednesday night basketball.
There's Wednesday night basketball. There's whatever it is. Maybe there's projects that we could do here at the parish. Maybe y'all could speak about what is, for the person who's listening who thinks, yeah, this fraternity thing, I don't think it's for me, and I don't really think I really need it. I'm kind of doing fine on my own.
Well, I think fraternity can take a number of different forms. I'm one of the guys that does not come to Saturday morning men's group. So that being said, I think this quarantine has shown that, like, there's little things that I think we take for granted, even in the daily social interactions that we have, that are basically completely missing in quarantine. Even things like going to visit your parents or your in-laws or whatever. And I think that fraternity can take a number of different forms. For me, a couple of the critical pieces are having somebody to push me to do the right thing, or to challenge my way of thinking about something, or my behaviors. But then the other thing too is having, like, brothers that you can, like, you don't even necessarily have to talk. You can just, like, sit and be together, right? And I think for me, being an introvert, like, there's still something very powerful in having a friend that you can just be around without even necessarily having to talk, but you know that they're there if you need to talk.
I don't know how someone would go through would go through life and find happiness and fulfillment without having at least one person to walk it with them. I find it impossible to do for myself, and I think, Adam, you just spoke to that you know, even as an introvert, you kind of get this stigma of, you know, just leave me alone and let me do it by myself. But at the same time, then, you know, you're saying, like, hey, I really appreciate when there's someone that's there with me. And I agree. I don't know how people can just do it by themselves. As much as we want to be strong and individualistic in our society, that there's really something about accepting the love of another person. And I think it is, at the end of the day, it is love, that you're accepting the love of another to hold hands through the journey of life with. And, you know, there's a lot of bad things that can happen to you, a lot of good things, and to be able to share that with someone, and it can, a lot of times it can be a spouse, it can be a sibling, it can be a friend, but to have that relationship, I think it's critical. And I don't, you know, as Justin, you said already, that likely the relationship that you do have isn't going to be able to fulfill 100% of those needs that you are going to come up with, or the issues or the joys that you're going to come across in life. That there's something about having your, you know, for me, having my wife, but then having a core group of good friends that, you know, I can rely on and fall back on when, you know, either when she's not available or just for things that she's not available to meet me at the level that I need.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an aspect of pride that happens in men, and I think it's, you know, don't get me wrong, I think it's a little bit more in men than it is in women, where men kind of think, like, I can be the Lone Ranger, I can be the wolf howling at the moon by myself, and I don't really need anyone. There is an aspect of humility to say, it would be good for me to be with other brothers. And there's definitely, as you said, Matt, an accountability aspect, and Jeff said it as well. But there's also just, like, there's a humility aspect that, you know, I'm just not fully myself if I'm just doing this on my own. I think there's a slow spiral down when man just kind of sits by himself all day. And I hope this isn't happening right now in the quarantine, whatever we're calling it right now, the pandemic, the whatever. But, you know, I think people are a little bit lonely. There's people missing this natural fraternity, and sometimes it's with grandma, and sometimes they're missing this human connection. But there's also this thing that brothers can do for each other. Just the fact that you know that they're meeting on a Saturday morning, whether you made it or not, kind of gives this little like itch in your belly, like, man, I can do better. And I think there has to be an aspect of humility within it. There has to be a crushing of pride a little bit that, yeah, maybe I don't actually think this is the best thing for me, but intellectually I know I need other brothers. I can't do this on my own.
100%. I think you need people to share that humility, and I think that's one of those things where I don't think you can get humility without other people, whether it's pushing you or expanding your horizons or challenging you in certain things. I don't think that's something you can get without other humans, and I think that's something that allows you to grow. I think allowing you to be humbled, whether it's in a physical goal or aspiration, or a spiritual goal or aspiration, or professional goal and aspiration. There's other things that you need people to challenge you and to learn and to grow. And yeah, I think that, it's a huge part of having people to grow and to share life with, is helping you grow and helping you get better. And no better way than brothers humbling you, whether it's challenging to get to a 6:30 Saturday morning men's group, or to, hey, I didn't see you at church on Sunday. What's
or
going
dunking
on
you on Wednesday night basketball, huh?
Or blocking my shot.
I think that's never happened, right?
Never.
We all think at our house we're like the best basketball player. Then you go play with everyone else, you're like, you realize where you line up, And I think it's not obviously just about basketball or sports or physicality, but
there was a reason I was picked last.
There's a certain amount of pride that happens with all of those things when we're just sitting by ourselves. We think we're the smartest, we think we're the most clever, and to ourselves, and we hang out and we kind of realize, humility isn't just like knocking ourselves down, it's being realistic, Yes, I'm realistic about where I'm at spiritually, physically, emotionally, and brothers can naturally kind of knock us down a little bit when we've inflated our idea of who we are, but they can also build us up when we've beaten ourselves up too much too.
I think it's really easy when you spend a lot of time by yourself to, one, become uncharitable, because you're not seeing anybody else for what they're going through, what they're dealing with, or anything. You just see them and pass judgment. Also, it's very easy to become kind of like paranoid, like everybody else is out to get you, or comparing yourself to other people a lot, and just in general kind of a turning inward on yourself. And so one of the things that has been very helpful to me in having strong male friends is, like, one, limiting those things. I have a tendency to be uncharitable, whether that escapes my mouth or not. In my mind, I have a tendency to be uncharitable. But also, like everybody has said, iron sharpens iron. Like, I want to hang out with the guys that are the best, right? I want to hang out with, like, these low-level, slack-off guys that don't care about how they're raising their kids or what kind of husbands they are. I want to hang out with the best guys so that I can become the best,
I feel like some way we're going to come back to Michael Jordan in The Last Dance. But, I think that,
we ought
is
to.
it... What?
We ought to.
Talk about current events. But no, I think that was one of the most kind of fortuitous examples of Michael Jordan pushed all of his teammates. You think about his teammates, Dennis Rodman, who was drafted at a low level. He's coming from a mid-major college. Scottie Pippen was a student manager for the first 2 years of his college experience, and then, that might be wrong, but I think it was like the first year or 2 years, and then he goes on to be probably arguably one of the better NBA players. Steve Kerr was a good basketball player, but no one really counted him as a threat. And he even mentioned in one of the episodes, to a fault, he wanted to win, and he wanted everyone else around him, and he built everyone else up. Some could argue he tore them down and built them back up, just with how he pushed them. But I mean, you need to be surround yourself with like-minded people, but also people who are willing to be challenged. And I think it goes kind of to the adage or old age theory of, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I mean, if I'm the holiest person or the best father or the whatever in that room, I'm in the wrong room, and I need to find people that are going to challenge me and are going to push me to.
They're going to humble you.
Yeah, and humble you and get you. Hey, I need something to work towards, and really, and not everyone's goal oriented, but
I'm a firm believer that the higher and I parent this way too, and I'm sure my wife hates it as well because I put some of it on her as well. The fact that I'm a firm believer in that the higher the standards that you set for someone, the more they are likely to achieve. They may not reach the standards that you set, but again, if you're setting the bar high, it gives someone the motivation to aim higher than they otherwise would have. And I know that I parent that way. It can be good, and at times it can be bad as well. That I can be overly demanding on my kids in that, or setting expectations that are probably too high. But I feel that it's likely better for them in the long run to have the higher bar set.
My wife always says, and she's going to chuckle when she hears this, but setting appropriate expectations for the age level that they're at. And I kind of in one ear out the other, because I think I'm in the same boat of I expect a lot out of myself, and so I think I expect a lot out of other people around me. And I think the same goes, and I maybe project that onto my children. But yeah, I think it is, you want the good of the others around you, and you want I think any parent out there would probably say, I want what's good for my children. You want your kids to be well adjusted and not be running around and
if we're mirror, essentially our fatherhood should be a reflection of God the Father. At the end, that should be our ultimate goal. And God as the Father, he expects, or maybe he wants perfection from us. And now there are caveats to that phrase, that no human being currently is perfect. We know of one fully human being that the church considers perfect in the spiritual sense of the word. But God still holds us to that expectation. When we don't meet it, he offers the opportunities and the means and methods to try again. And it's about that constant rebirth and the renewal of, hey, I'm going to pick myself up, I'm going to dust myself off, I'm going to try again. I failed, but that doesn't mean that it's over and done with.
With a lot of grace and mercy too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Jordan thing is definitely fresh in our mind, so it's a little hard to not think about it. But Father and I talked about this as well, that there's a way to push people and expect the best from them, and then there's a point of like beating them down. And it was pretty clear in some of the episodes he's just beating people down to kind of test them, to see like, what is this person really made out of? And Steve Kerr kind of famously fought with him, got a little fist fight. But he also beat down, I forget who his name, but one of his other teammates in the latter years. And he kind of said it was to test him. But, there's a moment where, especially with kids too, like the Lord is never it's kind of a paradox. The Lord expects perfection, like you said, Matt. However, he's never disappointed in us because he knows us. He knows we're going to fall. He has foreknowledge, obviously, but he knows us more than we know ourselves. So when we fall, our natural inclination is to think, man, I'm so horrible. I'm the worst. Man, I'm the worst. This is horrible. I had these high expectations for myself, and now I've fallen below them, and we beat ourselves up. The Lord never does that, obviously, and he has perfect expectations of us, but he's never disappointed. I think as a kid, that was like the worst phrase for me ever. And
I'm disappointed in you?
Yeah, I think parents think it's like nicer than saying you did wrong. Like, I'm disappointed in you. And I think it actually kind of messed up my psyche. I was like, well, I know they're expecting, whatever, A or B, and at this point I gave them C. However, where's the mercy? Like, if you're completely unmerciful to them all the time, that it kind of just beats them up. And we can do that as parents too. It's easy. I expected you to listen to me, but we realize, she's 2.5. She doesn't even understand half of the words I'm saying, for goodness sakes. She's just mumbling. I ask her, like, Teresa, why did you do that? And she says, home. Like, that has nothing to do with anything you just did in the last 5 minutes. I don't know how that's an answer. But we can have these weird expectations, like you said, Jeff, like age-appropriate expectations that, we can't, hold them to something that a 12-year-old, but we ought to have high expectations for them. But we have to realize who they are, and we have to have some mercy, like the Lord has with us, in knowing we're going to fall and how to build us up when that happens.
I think as fathers, one of the greatest resources that we have is that we were children, right? So, there's certain things from my childhood that carry over into my parenting style because that's how I was parented as a kid. The bad part is sometimes even the things that didn't work in parenting me carry over. But you also can put yourself in your kids' shoes. Like, you remember. It's like deja vu. You're like saying something to your kid about something good, bad, or indifferent that they did, and you have this flashback to like an analogous experience when you were a kid. And I think Matt and Jeff, you guys talked about like having really high expectations for your kids, and I mean I do as well. And like Jeff said, like a large reason for that is because like I have really high expectations of myself, and I also have a pretty good understanding of what it takes to be successful by any measure of that word, but my expectations always have to be tempered by love, right? Like, it's very easy, especially as the dad, to come across as unloving, I think, whereas the mom's love is always, I think, expected. Whereas, like, the dad's love probably carries a little bit more weight in a lot of regards because it's not always a given, right? Like, dad's expectations are really high. Like, if I earn a hug or a compliment or something from dad, that means something. But it's very important that the kids know that that's not linked to performance, right? That I love them regardless, that they get my hugs and my praise or whatever regardless because they're my kid, not because of how they perform or how they behave. And so I think it's a solid balance between being overly mushy with your kids and being soft and not expecting a whole lot, but expecting a lot, but then also giving a lot in return.
Intentionality, right? I mean, what are you doing as a dad intentionally, or are you just accidentally parenting?
My wife,
this kid showed up one day.
Wow,
they want to eat.
Not that quite an accident.
Missy and I talked a few years ago, and shame on us, we haven't done anything with it yet. But we wanted to use the mantra of purposeful parenting, like for the year. And we talked, when we were going through New Year's resolutions a few years back, that it was like, hey, let's be purposeful in our parenting, that everything that we do should have a reason for it, essentially. Maybe not everything, but the big things that we do or don't do as parents and as a family, there should be reasons for them. And we, just recently we were having another conversation about it, is what do we want our kids to take away from what they've grown up with? We're like, well, the first thing that kind of came to mind or came up as like virtues, right? That if there's something that we can teach our kids, we would hope to teach them some level of virtues. Okay, well, how are we going to do that? How do you teach the virtue of humility? And it's like, okay, if I want my child to understand humility when they are 18, or maybe not 18, but like in their mid-20s, once they're out and, in the real world and experiencing their conscience really unto themselves, that I want them to be pricked by this virtue of humility. So what do I have to do today now for their 6, 4, and 2-year-old selves to start teaching them about humility? And we're gonna sit down. I got a 4x8 whiteboard in my basement that we're gonna try and map out some of these, like, hey, what do we want our kids to take away from growing up, and what are some practical things that we can do today? So I don't have any answers, but that's our hope, and our plan is to do that. I can take a picture and share it with you guys.
You'll have to come back. Hopefully Justin will text us back so we can come back and can share. Because I'll be taking copious notes when you share that.
But like, what is your goal as a parent? And we have to parent towards that. Otherwise, it's just accidental parenting, and most of the time we're just correcting off of our own insufficiencies. And we don't want we want our kids to behave at church. Why? Because sometimes, let's be honest, it's because we don't want to look stupid. I don't want to look
totally an insecurity.
Yeah,
thing.
I don't want to look like
sure.
that dad that can't control his kids, and all the people are looking at me like, why can't you control your kids? What's your kid's problem? But that's not the way to discipline a kid, obviously, because they get the message that it's confusing for them. And Shelly and I jumped in. We had no kids, but then all of a sudden we had 2 Chinese boys that were teenagers. And we had to actually think about how are we gonna parent these kids, because they're not stupid and they see the inconsistencies. If we're disciplining them because they haven't done so and so, we better be doing so and so, and we better be showing an example of what that is, because otherwise it's just like happenstance. We're just like, well, I don't like that right now, or I was upset today, so pretty much everything you do is bothering me right now, so I'm going to discipline you. I think it's St. John Bosco. This was in the shout out to the That Man Is You program. St. John Bosco, there's a quote in it. St. John Bosco: discipline your kids not based on all your other stuff, but based on sin. Don't correct stuff that just annoys you. Like, what's the point of that? Your kids. All 2-year-olds are annoying. It's just inherent. They do silly stuff. They don't know what's going on. And if we're in a bad mood, or we've had a tough day, or we'd like to be doing something else right now, their silliness and their joy sometimes can even be annoying to us. Like, why are you singing so loud? Why do you have so much joy in your heart?
Why are you so happy
that you're singing so loud? Yeah, like, I'm trying to work right now.
Don't you know I had a terrible day?
Right, but we can easily discipline, and that becomes like a discipline moment, and the kid's like, what? Dad doesn't like when I sing so loud, and depending on the kid, they might never sing for 5 more years, just because they're so sensitive or whatever it is.
Or the fact that they were singing 2 days ago and you were singing right along with them. Yeah, you go back to the inconsistencies.
Do you guys ever call out your kids' behavior by the sin that it is?
Well, Teresa's only 2.5, so no, she doesn't have a fully formed conscience yet, so not yet. But yes, we do plan on doing that. We do plan on, it's a plan, obviously. Wishful thinking, but we do plan on having virtues in our house that we're going to discipline via the sins and virtues. you're not loving, you're not being loving right now, you're being disrespectful, you're whatever it is, and not just your joy is annoying, because sometimes that's really what it is. Obviously, we're not going to say your joy is annoying, but your singing right now is annoying, or your humming right now is annoying, or your whistling is annoying, or the way you walk right now. I mean, we've all been there. We have our moments. Okay, maybe that's just me. We all have our moments that whatever can annoy us, and that's not anything wrong with what they're doing.
No, so Beth, my wife, this is very intentional. She's very intentional about parenting me. When you said like goals for parenting, I was kind of like, yeah, of course. I have goals for my professional goals, my physical goals, and other goals. But I was like, parenting goals. Like, man, I'll be coming back to the whiteboard. I may go to Amazon.com and buy a big old whiteboard.
No, you just go to Lowe's.
That too.
Giant sheet of melamine.
Yeah. But no, she put together house rules that were based on the commandments of, and they were on our fridge for the longest time, and cleaning the fridge off, they got taken off. But yeah, and I think a lot of it is pointing those out, and whether you call it out by the sin, or whether you call it out by the house rule, or whatever it may be, I think that there is some level of, the kids might not get it now, and they may not register it now, and they, just like us, will keep sinning and do the same sin over and over again. But having the repetition that hopefully one day the geese will get that. And
that sounded like Mario Duck Hunter. Seriously.
Right. Yeah, I mean, hopefully one day if they want to come on the podcast, we might just well strut over here and join us. Hopefully one day we'll get to a point where we're recognizing some of our sins that we're struggling with, and that's where you guys and
that's the beauty of the brotherhood is like, because of these relationships that I've formed, I wouldn't have much hesitation calling you out, Jeff, on something, and just calling it for what it was and being like, hey man, I don't think that's right. You got to stop that. And I would expect the same to me to be done to me. I'm probably not going to like it, right? I'm pretty proud. And it's going to be a little fork to my humility and shot to the gut, but sometimes it's what I need.
But I think a lot of that is having people that will call you on it and know that it's
sure.
Yeah, it'll hurt, and you'll be maybe upset about it for a while, but knowing that they did it out of love, right, then out of like, man, the annoying, your pride is really bothering me.
The way
right
you're
now.
Walking is
right. But no, I think, and that's the same thing with parenting is, yes, you're doing it out of love, and some days it's out of annoyance and anger and frustration from the day. But ultimately it's out of love, and whether it's expressed explicitly that day, or if it's expressed over a period of time, I think that's where it's a lot more applicable to kids, where it's most time it is out of, and this is me speaking for myself, out of annoyance and sometimes frustration with the children's exuberant joy of yelling and screaming Frozen 2 soundtrack for the 1,000th time. But
if you ask why one more time, I swear.
Yeah, right? It annoys the heck out of us, but like, is that
curiosity?
Is that a sin?
Thing.
Like, is it a sin for the kid to ask why forever? Maybe when they're 13, but certainly not when they're like 4. Yeah,
you don't want to kill their joy or their curiosity, but sometimes you feel like that when it's like, man, I've answered why 853 times, and I can't answer why anymore. And sometimes we ask why to God a lot of times. It's like, we just have to accept it for what it is. And
it's humbling to say, I don't know, Jeff. Try it.
I know.
There's a Gaffigan joke there. What is that, Daddy? It's an antenna. What's an antenna? Never mind. It's a stick. You know? I don't really know what an antenna is, kid. I think, Matt, you touched on it. Jeff wouldn't be able to say, hey, brother, you're really kind of being uncharitable there, if you knew he didn't love you, or if you didn't have that relationship, or you didn't know that he cared about you and you had journeyed together for a long time. He wouldn't have been able to do that 7 years ago. You know, I'm not going to be able to do that with a random person at church.
Why do you think arguments on Facebook don't go anywhere?
That's another podcast. Yeah.
But it's
for another time.
It's the same effect, right? You're not in relationship. You're not in communion with this person that now you are trying to prove a point to, or correct, or right or wrong, or call something. And it just gets people angry when you are not doing it from a place of love that they're experiencing that love. It doesn't matter if you're doing it out of love, that's great, but if they're not experiencing that love, it's not going to hold any water.
Yeah, and we all have pride. Let's just be honest. Let's put it on the table. We all have pride, so when that person that doesn't care about me tells me I'm an idiot, I'm not going to accept that. I don't care what they say, or they that's why the role of
going to reinforce it.
That I'm an idiot?
No,
you'll just double down.
That too.
Yeah, right. You just double down on whatever they were scolding you over.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with a coach, I mean, Phil Jackson would have no authority over that Bulls team if they didn't know he had their best in mind. If he didn't actually care about them.
We'll get him on the podcast.
Yeah.
Seriously.
We're going to call
He
Phil.
should get his own documentary.
Yeah.
What was your hot take?
The hot take of mine, it means a lot, and it goes back a few years now. And being a father, coming up on 6 years here. And one of the things I've noticed and I feel strongly about is that a lot of other guys are, in my opinion, they are overly dedicated to their families. Now you may say, wow, that doesn't sound right. No, there's no such thing as being overly dedicated to your family. You can't be. But my experience has been that at times it can be really hard to find fellowship, to find time with other guys for fellowship. And the other guys are trying to fit in, their kids, their work, their marriage, their own hobbies. And what ends up happening is this brotherhood, this time for fellowship and brotherhood gets crunched. And it's frankly the bottom of the totem pole, and everything gets pushed on top of it. And it's been, there's been times I've been really frustrated by that, and I'd love to hear other opinions on it, because I believe that there is there is such thing as too much family time, and that bonding with friends has an importance that is often overlooked.
Yeah, I think some of that goes back to like the discussion we've had about consistency. You guys talked about, every other Saturday we get together for men's group or whatever, and you don't always want to do it, but you have a habit of doing it, and there's other guys relying on you to do it. And I think that same concept plays here, right? It's like it requires you to be intentional. It requires you to make the time to do it. Even though, there's just been times where it's like, I just want to go and lay in bed and watch, the Food Network or something, totally mindless. But I ought to hang out with my brothers, my friends, and, wouldn't I hate to find out that one time you said, nah, not tonight, that guy really needed you, right? And, you let him down. And maybe he didn't even know that he really needed you, but you talk about some stuff that night, and you're really happy that you did, or they're really happy that you did. It's just not all about you, but you need to make the time, even when you don't want to, right? It's a sacrifice sometimes. And most of the time, we hung out a couple nights ago, whatever. It's great. It's fun, right? We just kind of BS, whatever. And I think that's important too. But like again, making it a habit of it, right? So that Matt knows that he can count on me if he needs some time, right? Like, well, Adam's gotten in the habit of carving out time for his friends. Matt's gotten in the habit of carving out time for his friends. And your family knows that too, right? Like, they need that consistency too. They need to know that, like, my wife is going to have some time to herself tonight, which the kids are all asleep. She can sew or read or whatever she wants to do. But she also needs to have the expectation that, like, Adam is going to have time with his friends. And that's okay. But if you don't set that expectation, then, like you said, other expectations fill in the gap.
And I think there's a feeling of guilt there too, that, oh, I'm going to hang out with I'm going to hang out with Adam again.
Well,
and
isn't there for you sometimes, right? Like,
well, yeah, of course.
Still, I
tonight,
feel guilty.
I mean, this evening I left at 7:15, and all three kids were still awake, and so Missy had to do triple bedtime. Like, it's not easy to do that, but her and I have talked quite a bit and over the last 3-4 years with this, and like I said, it's been going on a bit, but she's really said, hey, you've expressed this, I know that you need this, go, it'll be okay, don't feel guilty. But there's still that part of me that feels guilty about it.
And I think you just touched on it, is knowing that it's good for you. I think that was one thing that I think Beth kind of called to my attention when I was hemming and hawing whether to go to men's group or to hang out with you guys, and being intentional about different things. Is it's good for me to have brotherhood, and it's good for my extrovert nature to interact with people. And yes, it's a lot easier to sit on my couch and read a book or scroll social media or mindlessly watch a show on Netflix or whatever it may be, but it's good for me not only in the spiritual sense, but also from I'm going to be when I come home, I'm going to be a better father and a better husband, and be less annoyed with the joy that my kids are bringing the next day. And I think having that expectation with my wife to know it's okay for you to do the same. And yeah, it's not going to be equal. There's going to be, with my own job, traveling a fair amount, not so much now, but the routine of, hey, I already do bedtimes by myself, so I need some alone time, whatever it may be. Okay, well then I'll take that responsibility as a parent to do that, and it for sure isn't equitable throughout the time, but no, I think it is just having that conversation and the expectation set that it's good for both of you to have that time and the fellowship with your friends and your brothers or sisters or whatever it may be, that it's good to have that, and it's good for you to not be together all the time, because it's I think my wife and I have found through quarantine, both working from home, that we have a lot of walks during the day, and we see each other through. She's my most favorite coworker right now because I see her all the time.
And your least favorite.
And my least favorite. But yeah, I think it is just seeing other people is good, and intentionally interacting with other people and sharing life with people is good.
So you'd agree that there is such thing as too much family time?
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm going to take it a step further. I think some families are too kid-centric, and it's all about the kids. It's all about the kids, and we run them around, and mom and dad don't even love each other anymore because they haven't had a date without the kids. I completely agree, and I'm trying to push it as much as at our house. And you're completely right. All of you are right. Like, it feels guilty. It's like, it's dad guilt, mom guilt, dad guilt, whatever, because, the perception is I'm going to have a cigar and some whiskey with my buddies, and I'm going to hang out, and it seems selfish, and it feels selfish sometimes. However, I know that I'm going to be able to love my family better when I get home. Whenever I go to a men's conference, my love for my family is like exploding out of every orifice I have. But I've spent like 8 hours with just dudes. But, I haven't spent that time with my family, and I haven't spent that time with my wife. I spend 8 hours with guys, but I come home and I love my wife more. And the same thing happens on Saturday mornings. The same thing happens when we just get together around a fire. I completely agree. There's this odd idea that we have to just be together all the time. It's like I said at the beginning, like your wife is not going to fulfill everything. Your family's not going to fulfill everything. You got to have brothers to do that. And I think it's also goes in with exercise and other things. Sometimes exercise looks selfish. Like I told my wife, you want me to be a good dad? I got to be able to go for runs and bike rides. It seems selfish, but you've seen me. I've lived with plenty of people in my life that if I haven't exercised in like a week, I'm a pain. That's when people's walking gets annoying to me, and we're not able to love because it's just good for who we are as humans to be with all these other people.
I think there's something that goes along with that too, is that our wives need that same thing, and I know that I'm not as good at giving that to my wife as she is giving it to me. So that's definitely something that I need to improve on. But it's critical for them to have those types of relationships too. And there's stuff that they can talk about with their girlfriends that they wouldn't talk about with us. Maybe partially because it is about us, or it's about their relationship with us, or it's about the kids or whatever. Like again, there's certain roles that we can't fill in their lives either, right? Or they don't feel comfortable divulging a certain thing to us because we're not going to understand it because we're guys and whatever. Like I get that. So I think it's important that we take that time to hang out with our brothers, but we also allow our wives some of that time as well to hang out with their sisters.
Well, thank you. Makes me feel a little better.
So see you tomorrow night.
I was going to say, now our wives don't have to ask us what we talked about. It's recorded.
Yeah, we should do this every time.
That's the easiest solution.
Here's the evidence.
just listen to it. You'll know what we talked about.
Honey,
Save ourselves some angst.
I really don't remember a thing. I promise I wasn't drunk. I just don't remember.
We want to do some shout-outs, and I'll start first and give you guys an opportunity to do a shout-out. Just a simple shout-out to anyone, maybe even who's listening, or someone who has helped you as a father and a brother, maybe shown you something here at the church, or maybe invited you into something. I'd like to shout out Chad Parent. He's been a fraternity brother here at the parish for quite a while. He's been an accountability brother to me and someone who can speak to me. I'd also like to shout out Craig Ethier. I know he listens to the podcast, so thanks for listening, Craig. Thanks for listening. Also, Pat Connolly. He's been giving great feedback. He said something interesting about the live stream mass. He said, I like the cathedral echo effect. And I said, well, we're not really creating that. It's just because the church is empty right now, and there's just a natural echo. But shout out to those guys for listening to the podcast and being a good brother to me.
I'd like to give a shout out to my wife, Missy. I hope she listens to this whole thing. Maybe I'll listen with her. We can have some good conversation about it. But I wouldn't be in the spot that I am today without her, and I can't really imagine who I would be had things gone differently. And you look back on life, and there's these seemingly small or maybe big decisions at the time that happen, but that have this ripple effect of just immeasurable impact. And I look at the improbabilities that her and I end up together, and it's beautiful. And walking this journey of life with her, raising these kids, and establishing our lives, that she gives me so much to be thankful for. On the fatherhood side, I'd like to give a shout out to Eric Brooker. He is a former parishioner of Transfiguration here. They've moved, him and his family have moved to a different city in the But I had an interesting conversation with him one time, and I was seeing how he was leading the faith just within his family, and I said, I was asking him about that, and he's like, "Hey man, look, you're a dad, you're the father, you just have to do it. You just have to do it. There isn't really another option." And it was very striking to me to hear it so bluntly, and it stuck with me too. I don't know how many years ago that was now, 4, 5 maybe, 3, 4, 5 years ago that we had that chat. So, yeah, shout out to Eric. Thanks for the advice.
I think I have one or two, and I think my wife is Beth. I appreciate all the kind of challenging conversations that we have, and I think, to echo Matt's point, a lot of it is I wouldn't be the son, the husband, or the father without a lot of the kind of challenging conversations. And I mean, she's not one to mince words, and she's very quick to call me on, to humble me on a number of different topics. But I think that's, a super important conversation, and obviously being able to talk to your spouse is important, but having conversations about parenting and about being a spouse and a son to your parents. And I think both my parents and my in-laws, my father and my father-in-law, are very good examples of father figures for me. And I think my father-in-law, obviously with him being close during these parenting years, have been important to just kind of see, obviously, how he parented his daughter, which is obviously now my wife, and his daughters. But I think knowing how I was raised and how he raised his daughters and how my dad raised me and my mom raised me is important to see. So yeah, I shout them out as well. And the last one, and I doubt he'll ever listen to this. Maybe he will. He's not a big social media guy, but it was a college teammate of mine at Winona State, and Alex Kautza. He actually introduced my wife and I. He probably was one that really struck the brotherhood aspect of faith and of Christian life. You could probably pick him out in a crowd, not because he's tall, because he's not. He's like 5'8", but he had follically challenged, like myself, but he had a cross kind of shaved into the back of his head with his remaining hair. But he was one that just drove the brotherhood of fraternity within not only being a teammate, but of being a brother, and he was one to humble you real quick from different things. And a lot of it, he challenged me in my faith and in relationships with other men, but also with my now wife, and kind of calling me on some knucklehead things you do when you're in college. But yeah, I think he was a huge proponent of mine, and love him dearly, and haven't seen him in a while, but hopefully I'll listen.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to give a shout out to my kids, who will almost certainly never listen to this.
Give them a few years.
You got to listen to it with them. They can hear your voice. And
no, this is like, my wife and I will listen to this, and we will ban children from our bedroom if we do so. But
they're watching Ted the Tiger dunks on Father Erickson videos.
Oh, Banzai!
But we talked a lot about the joy that children have, and a lot of times it's very easy to dismiss that, but when you take the time to try to participate in that joy with them, because they often want to bring you into it. And you can also, again, you have this opportunity to put yourself in their shoes. You have little flashbacks when you were a kid. And so, I think that actually having children they help a lot in forming me, at least, as a man and a father, because you interact with adults, and adults are very, a lot of them are jaded. They've become very good at guarding their feelings and stuff like that, and kids aren't that way. So like, when you hurt a little kid's feelings or whatever, or you scare them, or they're disappointed or sad, you know it immediately. And that's very helpful as a father to get that feedback, because so often we become desensitized to the power of our words and our actions.
Well, brothers, it's been great to hang out with you guys. If any listeners are thinking about coming to Transfiguration, finding some brotherhood, connect with us. It is an idyllic place to be. So thanks for listening. If you've listened this long, you got a ton of patience. So talk with you soon. God bless.